A very warm welcome to Happy Times and Places, a positively inclined Doctor Who episode commentary podcast in which I, Toby Hadoke, ask a special guest to choose a Doctor Who story. I will then commentate along to every episode, all the while trying to guess what my special guest's favourite things about each instalment might be.
Hello Toby, it's Mark Wright here. I'm a writer. I write lots of things about Doctor Who. For 20 years I've been writing and producing various projects for Big Finish Productions. I write for Doctor Who magazine and the Doctor Who figurine collection. And I was a co-editor on Doctor Who The Complete History across 90 volumes. And with Cavan Scott, I co-wrote the official Doctor Who miscellany Whoology to time with the 50th anniversary. The story that I have picked for you is The Ambassadors of Death.
Evening all. In Hadoke Towers it's beyond the witching hour, but don't worry, I've got a late night date with Sir James Quinlan. How will he greet me? Well, he's probably not in the best of shape, considering how he was last time we saw him. But let's see, eh? It's episode 5 of The Ambassadors of Death. So no, most stories, and in fact, when I was young, I thought all Doctor Who stories were 4-parters, apart from the occasional 2-parter, which I'd seen as a compromise of the Davison era, because my earliest memories are Invisible Enemy, Pirate Planet. And then proper seasons, that I remember watching all of, 17, 18, all 4-parters. Because you see, I didn't know that Shada was supposed to be a thing. There was no, and next week's Doctor Who, which was planned, isn't happening. So it just seemed all normal to me. So I remember being terribly surprised when I discovered that there were older stories that were things like 6, 7, 8, 10, 12 episodes long, and season 7 seemed like a stretch because the Cave Monsters didn't seem like a very long book, and Doctor Who the Silurians is 7 episodes. Good Lord. And here was Ambassadors of Death, which were 7 episodes that were supposed to be wayward and a mess. And I mean, they are a mess in terms of how they survive to be seen by us. I can't remember what quality this one's like. I'm not expecting a lot. There's a very nice placeholder picture of John Pertwee in the on the iPlayer to represent it. But as we've discovered before, the iPlayer pictures are not necessarily to be relied upon to even be from the correct episode. But anyway, I digress. I've had lots of lovely feedback. People who've been feeding back, who've been watching along, have very much enjoyed The Ambassadors of Death. It's a favourite to a lot of people, which I'm really pleased by. So maybe the small number, the small percentage of people who are the small percentage of the small percentage of people who like Doctor Who, who are the smaller percentage of people that like Doctor Who and listen to my podcast, who are the smaller percentage of people that like to listen to it early, so on my Patreon, all seem to be of a like mind to me that Ambassadors of Death is rather special and rather enjoyed and rather underrated and a favourite amongst many. So I hope those of you who are listening to this down the line, who maybe came into this thinking, Ambassadors of Death, I don't really know that one, or I don't really like that one, it leaves me a bit cold. Don't think that you're you're eavesdropping on some culty love-in, where we all gather together and, pampas grass outside in the garden means lovers of the Ambassadors of Death are welcome, and we all, come here and meet clandestinely and, swap ambassadors' stories, over mounds of Ferrero Rocher. But anyway, let's see if we can continue, because certainly I think, there is a reputation that it loses its way, Ambassadors, and it certainly, like all the 7-parters, has to go somewhere else, particularly in those odd episodes 5 and 6, which are delaying us from the conclusion. So let's see if they do it in style as we press play, with a reminder that Mark Wright, my guest, and I are even Stevens in the choosing the favourite thing stakes. So it's all to play for as we go for episode 5 of the ambassadors. Kichapow of death. I'm sure I've said this a lot. I never tire of this. I was talking to somebody recently who actually said, who was it? It was somebody, I don't think it was Steve Roberts, but it was somebody like that. Somebody who's a technical bod that's worked on Doctor Who stuff at a high level, is their favourite title sequence. It wasn't Steve. I can't remember who it was. So that's the end of... Dallas Cavell gets top billing for this episode for essentially dying in the reprise. Now, it's not like in the 60s where he'd have had to have come back the following week just to die again, because these are filmed fortnightly or certainly in blocks of sets and blah, blah, blah. So it's not that he did this one week and then came back and to be dead a week later, which he would have had to have done only, less than 12 months before if it was done in the 60s way. Like... Nick Zaran, who plays Lieutenant Sorba in the Space Pirates, who dies at the end of one episode and so comes back the following week. You've got to really press yourself. That's so timely intervention, Brigadier. Because how much further could the Doctor have buried himself into Dallas Cavell's ribcage? That's Alan Chun's getting killed there. You're a unit soldier played by Alan Chun's. You know the risks. Good. Oh, that picture on the wall was wobbling there. But good. Well done for the Brigadier, just being slightly cautious about holding the door handle. But yes. So Sir James Quinlan is dead. Oh yes. So that's the end of Dallas Cavell, who leaves us on a cliffhanger because when he died, and Doctor Who magazine listed him in Beyond the TARDIS or whatever, and said his real name was F.N. Lefebvre or something, I think. Yeah, I think F.D. Lefebvre. Anyway, it's not quite as simple as that, but I can't remember off the top of my head. I dig in to discover what Dallas Cavell's real name was, and I think he went by Norman. And certainly there's a Lefebvre there somewhere in his name. But anyway, it said he'd completed an interview for Out of the TARDIS or whatever their brand of guest star interviews were, which will appear in a future edition of Doctor Who magazine. And reader, it still hasn't. I'm still waiting for that Cavell interview. If it's out there, I want it. I'd love to hear from Norman or whatever he was called. There's something very effective, isn't it? That's a great astronaut's costume. It's even though it doesn't, cling like we might expect a sort of spacesuit to in a modern television. But everyone's got bloody rib cages, and every alien has to have sort of very, biceps and rib cages and all of that. Not everything had to cling to you tightly in the 70s. Probably a good job too, because we weren't all expected to be, packers of six around our midriffs. But anyway, I think those spacesuits are an effective, as I say, like a kid in a gas mask or a crack in the wall. You could take something that is innocuous, but given good filming and context and all of that, can look different, and they do look. And there's something to do with the body language of the aliens as well. I think they move in a they're not choreographed, but they move quite slowly and quite mysteriously and slightly forlornly, which gives them a sort of disconnect that makes them unnerving and strange, sometimes threatening, but sometimes slightly melancholy. Cyril Shaps's hair always goes a bit awry when he takes when he takes his hazmat suit thing off. Look at his hair's gone a bit wild there. I like that. I too have sort of, I'm going quite bald at the top, but the bits to either side of the baldy bit have if I grow it too long, I look like a startled owl. Actually not unlike. Am I turning into Cyril Saps in my old age? No, I'm not. I don't benefit from having his particularly sort of characterful look. Now, this is Tony Harwood. Tony Harwood, who is an ice warrior he's Rintan, he's a named ice warrior in the Ice Warriors, he's an ice warrior in the Seeds of Death, He's the ice warrior in the war games, and for years we could never find him. And in fact, IMDb had him down as dead in 2006. And then somebody contacted me on Facebook and said, I'm trying to contact my uncle. He's called Tony Hargreaves, but I think he worked under a different... Anyway, it was Tony Harwood. So I was like, right, so Tony Harwood is Tony Hargreaves. And then I put a thing on Facebook, I think, going, I'm looking for Tony Harwood, but he's called Tony Hargreaves. And somebody went, look, he died in 2006. Well, and I was like, no, because that's Tony What one do you think I haven't? They just basically Googled it or looked on IMDb. It's like, no, when I put a thing like that on Facebook, I'm not saying can anybody do the bleeding obvious things. And also, we know he's not called Tony Harwood, so that births, marriages, and deaths listing for Tony Harwood dying in 2006 isn't the guy, because he's called Hargreaves. But anyway, we did eventually find him in 2021 when we were doing the DVD for something else. Abominable Snowmen. I think we found him in 2022 and spoke to his son, and he died in the December of 2021. So he was there all of the time. And actually, once he'd been found, I think it was Bignell that actually found him. I'd given them the Hargreaves details and all of that. Actually, if I'd looked in a more efficient way, I'd have found him. And I didn't, because I was waiting for the person who contacted me to help, who then sort of backed off because I think there'd been a sort of family schism. Anyway, so there was a bit of detective work, and having thought he was dead, because this relative who contacted me didn't know if he was dead or alive, we thought, okay, no, so he might still be alive. And he was, funny enough, like Reg Whitehead, who was a Cyberman, also a very, very tall guy, who often play, who's actually posher than he seemed, because I think we associate, tall monster actors with being sort of heavies, but actually it turns out a lot of them weren't, because Steve Peters, who's one of the astronauts, was also actually quite posh, and I think I always imagined them to be, like sort of glorified stuntmen, but no, because you can be tall and anyway, that's Tony Harwood, who is the only time we see his face in Doctor Who. He's not got great posture, actually. He's slightly hunched over the shoulder. And how can you tell? He's not brilliantly delivered. But anyway, he's very tall, isn't he? But yeah, I found him. I found pictures of him dressed in a long coat with a hat, and he looked every inch the affable racehorse trainer guy. And he was there waiting to be interviewed for the first 20 years of this century, still working, and didn't find him. Damn. But anyway, at least we get to see his face in this, seeing as he's largely an ice warrior. Anyway, I've been talking through bits, haven't I? I like the bit where the doctor passes his medical and Ralph Cornish is like, oh, really? What's going on? Yeah, just brush it off. I'm fine. And I love the scenes where Carrington's stomping around space control, and Cornish is very coolly telling him, it's all going to be all right. Good old Lennox getting his... I like Lennox's story because he starts as this sort of rather forlorn, cuts a rather useless figure, and he's got a certain rabbit courage with the help of it, and he's empowered actually by Liz. So it's the female companion who is often, as we know, inaccurately associated with being hopeless and in need of rescuing. It's actually Liz who empowers Lennox to do the brave thing, and as he does the courageous thing, he actually delivers a sort of admonishment to the guy. He doesn't scurry away frightened. He carries on with the subterfuge by ordering Tony Harwood about as he leaves and making this smile. I think that's lovely. Now, didn't some of this give rise to the rumour that it was possible to discern from this that Benton is a murderer? Because John Levine, clearly standing on a very small set there, it's just the wall, isn't it? This isn't actually bad quality colour-wise. He puts him in the cell, but it's it's not John Levine that poisoned it, but because we don't see, it is possible to think that, but it's not. Benton's not. In fact, I was talking to somebody the other day. I think it might have been Paul Venezes, who said that he thinks it's John Abernethy, General Carrington, and we don't know from the list of personnel on the episode who it actually is in that scene. I don't think, and I'm not going to be able to discern it too closely because I'm going to have to be talking. But that's very beautifully set up, actually, because it's now set him up as being very nervous, and he's not going to talk to anybody until he sees the right person. So he says, lock the door behind me, which they do for his own safety, but which very sadly and ironically becomes the important component in his demise, because he says lock the door, and they lock the door, and then they lock him in with the isotope. So that's rather a cruel irony in his method of dispatch. John Pertwee can just carry he looks great in a spacesuit. He looks great in anything, doesn't he? He looks great in overalls. He looks great in a T-shirt. He's a naturally stylish man, in the way that Troughton is a naturally scruffy man. I don't know what Troughton was like in real life, because he dresses as the Doctor, doesn't he, at his conventions. I'm not sure he was that bothered about his outfits, was he, Troughton? But Pertwee is very, very stylish. Caroline John looks great in the boots, and that's just a one piece, isn't it? But I don't think we would dress a female scientist like that these days. Although he's ruthless, isn't he? Oh, he's so good. I won't hurt you. She's very good, you see. She's really good. She's a great companion. She's empowered. She's empowered Lennox, but then she took it very seriously when Regan had the gun to her chin, but she didn't falter. I think this woman's Joanna Ross, isn't it? I think her eyebrows are her eyelashes are extraordinary things. Again, I'm not sure if you had a female control room assistant these days, they wouldn't need to have quite so much glam on them. So yeah, John Pertwee going into space, which he's a very capable doctor, and I quite like the way he cuts through the 3 minutes. I take it you mean half an hour, and all of that. That's quite fun. But again, in other hands, you just go, I don't like you very much. But Pertwee just seems to, as I think I said last time, it's to me, it's a higher alien mind being sort of slightly impatient with our earthly ways. And Ronald Allen, to be fair, is equal to it. Ronald Allen is not belittled by Pertwee's unpleasantness. He keeps his cool, and he's even to it. Now, I've never discovered what's happened to this actor either. And I think, because John Levine is still with us, so that doesn't make a difference as to whether this is another episode with an entirely deceased guest cast. It's the sort of thing that keeps me awake at night. But what I like about this is all of this stuff is very, similarly with Inferno, there's lots of factory complexes at this end of the season, and it is a bit like, and there's of course been one in Spearhead from Space, been the factory, but it's at these times, these sorts of complexes were interesting on the eye. Here's Roy Scammell, and the beauty of this stunt is he falls off, and you see him land. That's Michael Ferguson going, yeah. We see the Havoc guys fall off things, but let's see them land, because we all know they land on boxes or on mattresses or whatever. But if we see them land, and I just think it's that extra, you have to do an extra camera setup. You have to make Roy jump, from a little bit to land at the other end, and blah, blah, blah. Look at that. That's a brilliant shot. Because you've got the reflection in the puddle. So he goes over the puddle, but then you see him continue his journey in the reflection in the puddle. Excellent film camera work. But this was enough. I think we sometimes think of this sort of dialogue-free somebody scampering, and he capers like an athlete. William Dysart, he swings himself down the ladders and over the gantries. It's a wonderfully physical performance that he carries off effortlessly. But that sort of stuff, we sort of think, well, that's just we'd cut a lot of this because it's just it's just padding it out. Really, we don't see all of that. But in the 70s, that's the sort of stuff that would these complexes were places that not a lot of people got to see, and certainly weren't necessarily seen on television a lot, because there's most television programs take place inside rooms. So if you've got a really interesting visual, which is a genuine huge metallic infrastructure which has signs with the word variant spelt wrong on them, and look at him, he's really equal to this. Well done, William Dysart, you're the best Bond we never had. And again, a bit like Pertwee, he's in overalls and a cap, but he it has not diluted his charisma and his sort of, his sort of, salty sort of sex appeal. It's just an unflinching physicality that he has that I think is sort of quite stylish and hot, but without being, he's not a dandy. He's a capable and hang on, who's this then? So I think the other person's got one more line. Yes, now Paul is convinced that that's General Carrington. And so when he said I brought you some food, I didn't think it was. But then when he said, yes, I will, I wasn't sure it wasn't. But that would have involved a costume change. And as you don't see the face, why wouldn't you just use one of the extras that you've got in studio? But anyway, it's not Benton. It's definitely not Benton. But I was going to dismiss the Carrington theory, but I'm not sure it's not. But I would be more convinced if he wasn't wearing the sort of fawn unit jacket, but there's no reason why he couldn't have got changed to do that. But yeah, it's definitely not Benton. But it was quite nice. There was there was a magazine article in Doctor Who magazine a couple of decades ago that said, here's a few things that are mysteries or that we don't have an answer to or that we've not thought of, and one of them is Benton a murderer? And no, he's not. But because we've seen Benton looking after Lennox prior to that, and it was him involved in the previous scene, you could be led to think that if you lapsed for a moment. Dum 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 dum. So this is all. I'm really enjoying this filming in the factory location. It's really adding an element to it, because sometimes middle episodes of six-parters, they suddenly diminish in scale a little bit, and it's lots of people talking in a room, and we have some of that, but it's high quality people talking in a room because it's John Abernethy and Ronald Allen and people like that. But we've had some sizable location sequences there, and they're very good. Not the greatest model, especially as it's on videotape, but that's a shame when we've had such good high quality film work in the factory. That's not magnificent, and yet that is brilliant. You've got they've made the effort of putting a hairdryer, have they, on Pertwee's face, and he's going for it, and being rather unvain, if you like. He's exposing himself there to looking not his best, and the blue hue is nice and suggestive of being on the monitor of the spaceship and shot through a particular sort of camera. All of that is really good. So it's keeping its quality high, which again, sometimes things get a bit sloppy in later episodes as everyone settles into it, but they're still making the effort to make everything look good, sound good, going that extra mile just to give things an extra push, like the G-force, like the colour of the picture, all of that. And actually, word too for David Myerscough Jones's sets, because you've got this this extra level here at Space Control, so that when John Abinary's stomping about, when he's coming in, and the Brigadier there as well, when he came in to say stop the countdown, you could get the camera zooming in on him from below, which gives it a bit more of a sense of urgency. And also you can see sort of people in the top right hand corner when Cornish is looking at the screen. There's just a chair with a female employee there at a bank of computers, which gives you a suggestion of stuff going on beyond where the camera can see, and more personnel. It's very clever. She's just on the edge of what we can see of the set, which suggests that there might be lots of other people alongside her down there. It's a clever way of making the space speak beyond the space that we can see. Whereas that lady, we only ever get her in close up. You don't actually know where she is. She could be anywhere. She could be down the hall. Because I don't even know what her shoulders look like, but you see her face a lot. Because she's not the one up there on the white chair in the top right hand corner. Well, I've never noticed before this viewing. He's great. I love Ronald Allen. He is so debonair, wonderful, silky diction, and so different from. And I love that casual, professional way. I'm sounding a bit like I'm in love with Ronald Allen. I kind of am. I love them all. I love Ronald Allen. I love John Abineri. I love William Dysart. And of course I love John Pertwee and Nicholas Courtney. So, I mean, yeah, that whole sequence of Regan messing about was only to add a bit more jeopardy to the Doctor's takeoff, but it was fine. And we've also, we've had this episode, Liz asking Lennox if Regan's really in charge, so we're getting a hint of the layers there. Lennox has sadly been killed, which is horrible. He gets an isotope for lunch, which means so the episode's begun with Quinlan getting killed. Tatalian got bumped off last time. Lennox gets killed this time. It's, if this is a bit like 24, isn't it? Where major characters keep getting bumped off, and it's a bit much more like modern television in those ways, because characters, that have been given sort of depth and are played by those sort of hefty actors, you'd hope you'd expect in a way to get through to the end. Although actually, Cyril Shapps, in all of his Doctor Who stories, I've just worked this out, isn't in all of the episodes of any of them. Because he's only in the first 2 episodes of Tomb. He's just got killed in this. He's only in the first episode of Planet of the Spiders. And does he come in episode 2 or maybe 3? 2, I think. Maybe 3 of Androids of Tara. Certainly not in episode 1. So he's not in the whole of any of his stories. But yeah, that's poor old Lennox. He's gone. Now this is an attempt at doing a bit of slow-mo, which means that Pertwee goes slightly out of sync with his voice, but that's fine. It gives it a weird kind of spacey vibe, which is fine. I think that's really effective. And of course, that's what's happened now, is we're back in space, so we're back to the site of the first episode where the astronauts went missing. So again, it feels like we're building up to something important, because now the Doctor is there. The Doctor is where the danger began, in space, where those astronauts went missing. But of course, the Doctor's either going to find out what's going to happen, or he's going to end up in big trouble. Because the Doctor's there, we feel like, because a lot of this story has happened with the Doctor being away, and he's been rushing to catch up. Whereas now he's there. He's going to get some answers, especially as it's just AA Englander this time round, so he's responsible for the puddle. Well done, Adolph's puddle. And for a story that's been about human shenanigans, because we don't really know what the astronauts are, and we've not seen their faces, so they as far as we're aware and concerned, they're men in suits. An unidentified flying object heading towards the Doctor suddenly takes this story into a slightly different territory. And are we going to see some aliens? There's going to be some explanation as to what's happened to Van Leyden and Michaels and Lafee. I like the name Lafee as well. I've never come across a Lafee. There's There's a Simon Legree who is a unit sergeant in the Time Monster, but he's also a figure from literature, isn't he, Simon Legree? But Lafee, Frank Michaels and Joe Lafee, I think they're good names. Frank Michaels is just normal there, but that's good nomenclature, especially as then you've got Charles Van Leyden. Yes, I like the names as well, the nomenclature of the ambassadors of death, but surely the names are not going to be my favourite thing of episode 5. What's going to be my favourite thing? Well, the thing that I noticed the most, I think, was the puddle shot, which was absolutely fantastic. I've already chosen William Dysart, so I can't have him. I think the model work in space is very good. I loved Dudley Simpson's score. It's excellent. I do love Ronald Allen as Ralph Cornish. I've got a feeling I probably won't end up choosing him because I'm almost certainly going to choose John Abineri and General Carrington at some point, aren't I? Which is a shame because in any other story, Cornish would be there. And I think I've said before, he has the harder job, you know. William Dysart and John Abineri have a lot of stuff to do that actors love doing, whereas Ronald Allen is pretty much all... this is happening, this is not happening, are you sure this is happening, I can help this happen. And as I say, he lends it such a debonair professionalism that and he's cool in the face of drama, but he doesn't diminish the drama. He's not undermining the drama by being casual. He's almost emphasizing the drama by being cool in a crisis. Why don't you just Ronald Allen, just get a room together, Toby? I know. But I do like Lennox's rabbit courage. I do like the way that when Lennox escapes, he says to Tony Harwood, and keep an eye on that girl. I did like John Pertwee's reaction to the fact that his medical was amazing and he was a bit sort of embarrassed by it. I like the hairdryer to his face. I like the Ambassadors of Death. I think it's fab. But I think... I do like the fact that Lennox was empowered by Liz, so that Caroline John, even though she's a prisoner, is a prisoner, but she's useful to them because she's a scientist. She's not just a hostage, but also while she's a hostage, she is proactive and gets loads of stuff done. And I like the fact that Lennox had left his key for her first time, and then obviously they couldn't do that again because Tartaglia had found her at the same time as he lost his French accent. I like the fact we see Tony Harwood's face. I like the ambassadors' spacesuits. I do like the score, but I think I like that Lennox, who could have just been this, fawning lackey type character, the bad guys. We've seen them before. The bad guys, sometimes reluctant, sometimes obsequious, but certainly, sidekick who is scrawny and secondary, and brings a different dynamic to the villainy that is not always complicit. Sometimes is, but when it is, it's it's salacious, crumb-like. But this iteration of it is actually he's reluctant because he's not really bad, and he's in a position that he doesn't want to be in, but he's got no choice. And Straps is so good at suggesting sort of that broken dignity. That failure, that sense of being yesterday's man. And he actually, it's sad that it costs him his life, but he actually, he develops a backbone and, go for it, Stephanie. I'm assuming he's called Dr. Stephanie Lennox. So do I choose that? I don't think Mark will have chosen that, though. What will Mark have chosen? Might he just choose the score? Because it is a great, it is a great Simpson score. No, I'm going to choose Lennox is, partially because of Liz's involvement with it, Lennox's growing of a backbone and the fact that he's introduced in the story as a kind of, as a lackey, and actually ends up, even though it is alas to no end because the baddies are everywhere, which I think is great and adds to the conspiracy theories. Or is it that I like the conspiracy theory part of the story? The fact that there's nowhere to turn, and even in a cell surrounded by all our heroes, you're not safe for an isotope for breakfast. I do like the X-Files conspiracy theory. No one is safe, even on, even at the heart of the operation. Ooh, do I choose that rather than just that specific Lennox moment? Because that is a really good aspect of the story that I think contributes to its great success. That X-Files-y kind of stuff. So it seems a little bit ahead of its time, and with Doctor Who, you quite often have a minister who is, stroppy or obstructive or an idiot, but you don't have a suggestion that there's a corruptness that goes right to the very top, that our heroes actually have people on their own side working against them. In that way, it's, cut from that wonderful cloth of Quatermass 2 right through to the X-Files. And I love all of that stuff, and that's why Line of Duty is so successful, because of the, the suggestion that there are bad guys on the inside, and that always seems somehow more exciting. And it's insidious, isn't it? More so than having, external, malign forces coming at you from outside, because you can defend your city walls, if you like. You can defend your borders. You can pull up the drawbridge. But if the malignancy is, behind your own battlements, that's somehow scarier and more insidious. So I suppose that's what leads to Lennox's death. And actually, Lennox's death is what slightly perhaps takes away from, that punch the air moment of his rabbit courage, where he, not only makes his escape, but pulls off a convincing performance as he does so, where, it might have been tempting just to have him go, oh yes, I'll be back in a minute, and run off, but to have him go, keep an eye on that girl, that's wonderful. It's a lovely moment for Shaps, and it's a lovely piece of writing, and it gives Caroline John a brilliant moment. But he does then go to HQ and get killed, so it's not that much for triumph. So I'm going to take a quick about turn and go, much as I love that for Lennox, and much as I love the way that William Dysart zooms around the industrial complex, I love the fact that Roy Scammell lands when he gets pushed off that gantry. I'm going to choose the fact that there is interference from the very top, that at every level the Doctor and Ralph Cornish and the Brigadier are being blocked, or they're being obstructed by forces supposedly on our side, which makes it murky, because he doesn't quite know who. Desi Cornish, he says that, I think, last episode. He doesn't quite know who, and somebody's feeding Regan his stuff, and somebody is there to give Lennox a plate full of radiation. That is, so yeah, X-Files conspiracy, actually Quatermass 2 has that as well, which feels so and the fact that this is so early, nearly half a century before Line of Duty, and I know Line of Duty is not the first either. Loads of brilliant conspiracy thrillers peppered throughout the past few decades, and they always seem to strike a chord and always rather compelling. So I'm going to go for the fact that this has a real conspiracy element that makes it not only exciting and tense, but makes it slightly paranoid as well. We like the paranoia. What is Mark's favourite thing of episode 5? Took me a long way to get there, didn't it? He's now going to choose somebody's thumb or a bucket or a hat.
Here we are at episode 5 of this 7-part marathon. They are a bit of a marathon journey, are doing a 7-part story, so apologies for that, Toby. For episode 5, I am going to draw out the work of the brilliant Cyril Shaps, guest star Cyril Shaps as Dr. Lennox. I think it's just one of those performances. Cyril Shaps is so underrated. He's in several Doctor Who stories, and he's always brilliant. But I think this is by far his best performance in Doctor Who. He plays that tragic desperation of Lennox so well, and that couples really well working with Caroline John as Liz. So I think he is, and there's a real tragedy under the character. He's not just a one-note villain. Again, another part of the story is nobody is just a one-note villain. Everybody's got some kind of motivation. Lennox, it's someone's paying him money to do a job of a scientist, but he sees the error of his ways, and it doesn't end well. But I just think there's a real undertone of tragedy in Lennox's desperation, and I think I'm just going to call out the work of the highly underrated Cyril Shaps.
I'm not allowed to swear, am I? Oh well, that's just typical. Because I'd have, even though I chose, Lennox's moment and story, I'd have given myself that. Because Cyril Shaps is, of course, essential to the success of Dr. Lennox. If I'd chosen what I very nearly chose, I'd have got the point for that. I would now be ahead. But as it is, just at the last minute, somebody poured some M3 conspiracy variant into my supply, and I ended up going in a completely different direction from that I'd looked certain to go in. See, always go with your instinct. Never overthink things. Never. See, this is what, as a comedian, it's what I say to comics. Never do what you think the audience want, because then you're doing a compromised version of you. Do what you want to do and persuade the audience that that's what you want. That's advice for comics. Don't you go to the audience, bring them to you, because if you're a compromised version of what you want to do, you're not going to convince them. They'll see through the artifice. In Happy Times and Places, Toby, if you choose a thing, go with it, because there's nothing worse than choosing the wrong thing, apart from choosing the right thing and then at the last minute deciding not to choose that and choose something else instead. And then the person chooses the thing you were going to choose, which is exactly what happened there. So, screwed that up, didn't I? Oh, well. There we go. I would like to think that somebody tipped Mark off there that I was going to do that. So he chose that specifically to make it even worse. It is, rather appropriately enough, it's all a conspiracy.
I think you'll find. I think you'll find. I think you'll find.
I think you'll find.
Well, I think if you're going to be I think you'll find it, I think you'll found, then you may as well be found out by the best in the business. Richard Bignell has been in touch. He has all the bits of paper. And he says, with regards to the Lennox in the cell question, the script specifies that this is Carrington. The scene description begins, Lennox is asleep in the bunk. Carrington, dressed as a soldier, enters with tray and puts it on the table. Lennox wakes up. The dialogue is also attributed to Carrington. So there you have it, from the script itself. It's John Eboneri putting on a funny voice. Well, not a funny voice, but a disguise, and filmed from the sleeves down. Thanks, Richard Bignell. I think you'll find you're definitely the go-to man for this sort of thing. Thanks very much for listening to Happy Times and Places, which is presented by me, Toby Hadoke, and my special guest, Mark Wright, who's just come off Twitter. He's an ex-Twitterer, but he is on Instagram at mrwright2317, because he was born on the 23rd of 1917. Anyway, I'm grateful to him and to the patrons who make this podcast possible, and they include Ruben Herfindahl, Joel Ahrens, Joanne Abbott, Keith Adams, Mark Aldridge, Kit Allen, Neil Allen, Sebastian April, Tilt Ariza, Radit Aritza, Endorf Arwin, Simon Ash, Richard Alt, John Babb, P. Baker, Richard Barker, John Ball, Stephen Bamford, Simon Barker, Ollie Barrett, Andy Benison, Richard Bignell and Peter Blackett. The music is by Dave Gates and the artwork by Dylan Patterson. Did you like the way I said those names? If you did, I could say your name that way, you know, if you go to patreon.com/Toby Hadoke. There, for as little as £3 a month, although there are higher tiers if you choose to ascend, you can get advance releases, you get exclusive material, some of it in photographic form, some of it in interview form, and some of it in monthly AMAs, but you're also around 6 months ahead with Happy Times and Places, and a couple of episodes ahead with Too Much Information and Indefinable Magic. There is also a podcast called Far Too Much Information, which only the patrons get. That's at patreon.com/Toby Hadoke. You could also go to kofi.com/Toby Hadoke if you don't want to subscribe to a monthly thing and just occasionally want to make a donation to support these podcasts. You get nothing in return but my gratitude and, you know, a bit of fun pretending you're buying a coffee when actually you're not. And although I'm not going to say I won't drink coffee with any donations, it's unlikely to. I have about 2 coffees a year. But anyway, you get the gist. And you can do support of a non-financial kind, if that is preferred. And I totally get that. The support of you listening to these is, frankly, more than I could hope for. But if you could go to iTunes, Podbean, Spotify, all the places that one gets these things, and give them a 5-star rating and a couple of lines of review, that really helps to tweak my algorithms and make them look very sexy indeed. You can also follow these podcasts on social media at Hadoke Podcasts. I have my own Twitter feed at Toby Hadoke. I'm also on Instagram at toby.hadoke, and I have a Facebook page and a website, www.tobyhadoke.com. Of course, I record the intro differently every time. I could just have a track that I just pop on saying, "This is Happy Times and Places, a positively inclined Doctor Who episode commentary podcast." But I don't know, I quite like to do it afresh. So in a way, I'm a bit like Season 7. I mix it up, I make it different. I don't know why. I don't know if anybody notices it. And it sometimes adds I suppose if I've done, 300 episodes, that takes a couple of minutes because I usually get it wrong first time, or I decide I don't like it or whatever. If I added up the time that had taken, I could probably done you like 100 more. I'm not very good at maths. Gazillion, billion, trillion more podcasts. But there we go. It means that the opening is a bit like, so why haven't I done a Happy Times and Places opening? Why haven't I done Welcome to Dude? Because I've got a truncated version of the theme. You've just heard it. I've got 2 stings. I could do my own Happy Times, Kutapow, and Places as an open. That would have been witty, wouldn't it? Well, I've got 2 episodes to go, so the people who don't listen to this bit at the end, they might get a pleasant surprise. Although I'm not going to record the last 2 episodes now, so I might forget between now and then. I'm quite busy at the moment. I've just learned how to make bread rolls, out of chickpeas, because we're trying to eat healthily for various reasons. For both of us could do with that, and so we're low fat, no gluten, various bits and bobs, and just trying to no processed stuff, organic, decent stuff. And I'm fortunate that there's usually one of us at home who, when they take a break from work, can rustle up a bread bun or 2 made out of chickpeas and psyllium husk and a bit of olive oil and not much else. And they were bouncing spring. I've been making bread out of buckwheat groats as well, which you Well, you soak the chickpeas overnight as well, but you soak the buckwheat groats overnight, and then you zhuzh them up with water, and then they sort of ferment themselves, so you don't need yeast or anything. So there we go. I don't quite know why the ambassador. Oh, it's because I'm not going to record any more episodes now because I'm a little tired, but because I've been. Because I've actually just eaten quite a lot, even though I'm trying to eat healthily. I've eaten a lot of buns, but they're very good, just with chickpeas. Who would have thunk it? There we go. Anyway, more recipe tips available. Not really, only in the post credits of this podcast that people come to for Doctor Who. Frankly, not for cooking tips. But anyway, I'm quite chuffed that I've learned to make 2 types of bread with no wheat flour, no yeast. And not too many additives of any kind. Yum, 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 yum. Can you hear the chair creaking, by the way? I need to get a new chair because my chair in the booth is very creaky. And that's not professional. If you're a professional voice artist, you shouldn't have. Buy some windows. And now on Radio 4 Extra, hours of fun. Now, you see, I've wasted loads of times there because I could have had a post-credits thing on the fact that why didn't I do the opening titles the way the ambassadors are, that my opening titles are different every time, so I'm a bit like Season 7. That would have been a reasonable point to make. Out you get. Or I could have said, I've been making bread. That would have been, pointless, but it's post-credits. What do you expect? Then I could have got out. Or I could have done, listen, I've got a squeaky chair. But I did all 3. And now I'll have nothing interesting to say for the next episode. Because usually, these are fascinating and hilarious and a mine of information. Anyway, I'm going to go away now. I've wasted your time 3 times. Ever so sorry. 3 times for 3 astronauts. That's what it was. Yeah. Van Leyden was the bit about the credits. Michaels was the bit about bread. And Lafee was the creaky chair.